welcome to today's event. I'm happy that so many of you could come, even if we have this raining weather that delays the traffic a little. Today, we will firstly have a very, very short presentation on the ARPIS project. Then we will have the first part of the training on how we are analyzing and presenting data in the European Union. After a coffee break, we will continue with a roundtable discussion on issues that are of importance for you, and we will end up with a lunch. About myself, my name is Henry, and I'm the team leader on the project. That's the very, very short introduction now. And regarding the ARPIS project, the project has two objectives. One of them is to support the national authorities to provide information that are public available, and this information has to be market information that has to be relevant and reliable. It has to be statistical data and other information to agriculture and the life in the rural areas. Besides that, we also have to enhance the improvement of agricultural activities on farms, rural business effectiveness, competitiveness, job creation, and have a growth in the rural area. So it means that the project will support all the development of what's going on in the rural area, the rural business. The activities are divided into 4 results. The first result, it is to develop an information system, also what we call the ARPIS system, which have automatic transfer of data, and the system should also be available on mobile applications. So this technical development of a portal, it's one important part of the project. Then we have to look into how the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Economy, they can elaborate and develop data that can be put into the system. We're looking into data management, analysis of the data, and econometric methods and modeling. The 2 last activities are more related to data that has to be put into the system. Result number 3, it is a further development of information systems and integrate the best practice of the EU. And activity number 4, it is to support and enhance the capacities of the Ministry of Economy so they can demonstrate local business opportunities. Hopefully, no, it has to be through an interactive map that shows the integration of social economic indicators in the regions. Let's have a very fast look at each of the activities. Activity 1, it was this technical development of the portal. There we have assessed the IT environment, the existing systems, we have prepared technical specifications, and we have developed and we have now to develop the technical portal with automatic data transfers from other systems. We have to identify the information for the portal, both information that are already available in Azerbaijan, as well as information that you think it's important, but first has to be made available, first has to be developed. Then there has to be made a legal agreement between the portal and all the different providers of information. This legal agreement will be made as a model agreement that can be adjusted a little according to, or depending on who the data providers are. And of course, the portal has to be functional. It has to work. Regarding enhancing the capacities of Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Economy, there has to be training on making agroeconomic analysis, and today's event is a part of this training. We have to elaborate a publication and dissemination plan for the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Research Center on which information they should put into the portal, onto the portal. There has to be elaborated to key sector, to sector analysis for key sectors. And there already have been an extensive training program for Ministry of Economy. Regarding the further development of the existing information systems, we have to look into the system for collection of prices on agricultural products. There already have been an assessment of the existing system. There will be elaborated a strategy and action plan for further development of the system, and we will implement selected models from this action plan that will be agreed with the ministries and the EU delegation. Several of you have already seen the system for estimation of the yield of crop production. So there is elaborated a concept and an action plan for this early crop estimation system, and a pilot project has been implemented in Guba-Kaçmaz region. Finally, we have to look into the FDMS, the farm data monitoring system, to improve the output materials so the collected data can be more used for farmers, for ministries, and others who want to benefit from these data. And finally, the fourth main activity results, it is to identify critical economic development indicators in the Guba-Kaçmaz region. There will be made studies of capacities for development of the non-oil sector in the region. One or two business modules targeting small and medium-sized enterprises will be developed, and there will be an interactive GIS map to integrate and disseminate the collected information and present it on the ARVIS portal. That's very, very shortly about the project. And a few facts. It is that the project is funded by the European Union. The implementation period was from January last year until December this year, but it is considered to extend the project until June next year, and the main implementing partner, it is International Development Ireland, who is the consultants company that is lead of the consortia. That was very, very shortly about the project. Then I have to change, just a moment, I have to change Then we'll go to the next part, and this is the training. It's a presentation of experience from the European Union on how we are analyzing, how we are using and publishing data on agriculture and rural development. I have a very practical information in the beginning, and it is, we have a recording of the session here, but it is just for later online training, and you will not be, your faces will not be seen in this online training, and your questions will not be there as well. If there's a need for having the questions, having your questions in the online training, we will have some speaker to present them. So just to assure you, you will not be included in this online presentations. That was the technical part. Then the next part, it is if you have any questions regarding to the presentations here, do not hesitate to ask during the presentation. I think it's better to clarify the questions when we have them, instead of waiting until after the coffee break. Although I would like that that comments or discussions could wait until after the coffee break. Yes. My background, it is that my parents, they had a small farm in the countryside in Denmark. So I'm grown up with cattle and poultry. I have been educated as an economist, and I have been teaching at our university in the second largest city of Aarhus in mathematics, statistics, and managerial economics. And besides that, I have been working at the Agricultural Advisory Service in Denmark for 28 years. So my background, it is Agricultural Advisory Service and making analysis on micro data. Data from farms, data for farms, not those national sector analysis. In my presentation today, I will focus on not so much on technicalities, not on technical issues, not on formulas, not on all these complicated calculations. We will see more of it as from a user point on how researchers can analyze and present data, how ministries can comment on the data, can question to the researchers, and how we can get a better understanding of different analyses. And the very first question economists, they always will ask, it is, do we get value for money? All this money we are using for making the analysis, is it worth it? When we look at the Danish FADN system, FADN, it is the system where we collect data on accounts from farms, and it is similar to FDMS system here in Azerbaijan. When we look at the Danish system, where we are collecting data from 2,100 farms, we estimate that the cost is approximately €500,000. And the question for our government, it is of course, why should we use €500,000 on statistics when we can use them on hospitals, we can use them on schools, we can use them on so many other things? And the answer is, of course, it's okay to use money on these analyses if the value of the information has a bigger value than this €500,000 it costs. I'll come back to that in the very end as well. But just to say, every time we are collecting data, we are making analysis, we have to think, do we get value for money? And I think this is also the question you have to ask yourself in the ministries when you are asking for some information. 40 years ago, when we looked on analyses made on agriculture, it was there we focused on traditional farming, traditional agriculture. We saw how was the farm economy, how was the profit and the cash flow for farmers with cattle, how was the information for farmers that were specialized in horticulture or in crop production or in poultry production. And what we analyzed, it was a lot of, are there differences between the regions? Are there differences between the different type of farms? Do cattle farmers make it better than farmers with crop production? And is there economy of scale? It was typical such questions that were analyzed. And the way it was done, it was simply to make some simple averages of data. For example, when we took the data from the FDMS, we make analysis on all cattle farms and say what are the average figures, or we make analysis for regions, what are the average in the region. Easy to make, easy to explain, easy to understand. But nowadays, the analyses, they are quite different. Of course, we still look into economy on farms and agriculture. But we also look into environment. That's a big issue in EU. We look into animal welfare, we look into biodiversity, we look into how much do farms affect environment, and how much does it cost. We look into living conditions in rural areas to see what are done there. We look into rural development to see all the rural sector, how is it, all the rural areas, how are they doing it. We look into climate change to see how are farms affecting the climate change. And we use a lot of advanced models that is partly illustrated by these formulas. And for sure, many of us do not understand all the details in these formulas, but that's the situation now. Who are then using the information? Yeah, first of all, it's politicians and it's ministries. They are looking into how which impact their policies will make in the agricultural sector, in the rural areas. And I'll come back to that with some examples. When I worked in the Agricultural Advisory Service, we had this opinion of that farmers, they were interested in improving their production, improving their profit, improving their results, and therefore we presented a lot of materials on farm economy. But reality was somehow different, because when farmers are harvesting potatoes, they are thinking potatoes, potatoes, potatoes. They are thinking how many potatoes, how many bags of potatoes do we harvest, how many tons of potatoes do we harvest. As economists, I would prefer that they were thinking of money. How much money are we making? They should not count 1 ton of potatoes, 2 tons of potatoes, 3 tons of potatoes. They should calculate 50 minutes, 20 minutes. How much are we making of money here? Reality, it is that many farmers in Denmark, they have focused on the technical part of the production. Input, feeding, fertilizing, yields in quantities. But what we very much would like them to do, it is to think into money, to think into how much value they get of their activities. They should prioritize what they're doing. Also, companies in the agricultural sectors are very important, are very interested in the data. Also the data on from the FDMS system, from the FADN system. They are also interested in improving their performance. I'll come back to that later. And then, of course, we have a lot of other users, lobby organizations, agricultural advisors. They get a lot of information, they get a lot of knowledge, they can be better in advising the farmers. The teachers at the universities are using the data for getting better knowledge and get better information from their students, and students, of course, also using such data. What we see on the photo here, it is mink. It's an animal that is used just to producing the fur for expensive coats for rich women. And the mink sector in Denmark, it was very big. But in November last year, the mink animals, they got coronavirus. And of course, the government was very afraid of that the virus should go from mink to human being, mutate, and suddenly we could not control it. And on the television, our Prime Minister said, we are going to have a new Wuhan in Denmark because we are having all these animals where the coronavirus can mutate and develop. So, all minks in Denmark were killed. No, they got gas. So it was 17 million minks that were killed, 800 farms were closed. This was, of course, a big issue for the farmers. And all newspapers, they focused on those farmers who has to get rid of their animals and suddenly had no living any longer. But there were a lot of companies in the rural areas. There were a lot of companies in the rural areas that also were affected. Of course, there were those who were producing feed for the animals. Those companies had to close because they have no customers left. There were those who were producing the cages the animals were in. They had to close suddenly. There were also all the workers there, both in the companies and on the farms that suddenly lost their job. You can imagine if a lot of people are moving away from some areas, then suddenly there are not any longer sufficient children for the schools or the kindergartens. They are missing some taxes for the local authorities and so on. So it's a huge part. And of course, there were also banks that have provided credit. Suddenly they lost their customers. There were auditors that were auditing all the accounts of those farms. They also have lost their customers. So there were a lot of effects of this. Just to make this as an example, how rural areas really are affected by good or bad economy in the agricultural sector. Because it's not only minks that covers for, it also covers for cattle, it covers for poultry, it covers for horticulture. It was when it was decided to cull the minks, there were no analysis done on the economy. It was just health reasons that were the most important. So afterwards, the government had to find out how much compensation shall we give the farmers. And, of course, the compensation were divided into two parts. Farmers should have compensation for their buildings and the inventories that suddenly could not be used for anything any longer. And they should also be compensated for loss in income for a certain period. Based on the FADN data, the FDMS data, they could calculate that the compensation for farmers should be around 2 billion euro. 2 billion euro. And that was just the compensation for the farmers. But they had good data, a good database where they could take these figures from, make the analysis from. Besides that, €500 million was used to compensate the industry that was affected, feeding companies, especially companies producing feed. But there were no compensation for the banks, for that suddenly lost their customers, or for the advisors who lost their clients, or for the auditors who lost their clients. But all these budgets made by or provided by Ministry of Finance, it was based on the FADN data. And then you can ask, how big was the mink sector in Denmark? And if you calculate the value added by the mink sector, how much money they generated totally in banks, auditors, feeding companies, all other companies, and at the farms. The value was between 100 and 300 manats each year for each inhabitant in Denmark. That also say how big effect a sector can have. So, my brother and his 3 kids, they lost something between 500 and 1,500 manats each year because the mink sector was closed. Yeah, five persons. That my brother, his wife, and the 3 kids. Each of them are losing between 100 and 300 manats. So this means that this family will lose between 500 and 1,500 manats per year. Just to say, it was quite a big sector. It was quite important. Let's